Let's look at your photograph here, your publicity photograph from WSM.
Well, of course, this is my. When you went to work at a station, you always got a publicity shot. Yeah, I don't know, how's that?
That would have been in 1951.
That was in 51. One of the big studios in town had their business, and so at some point in time, I greased my hair down and and went down to this photographer's studio and got a picture made. That was a little better.
And here's another one.
Yeah, this is another one. This was not my publicity shot. This was just a shot that somebody took while I was doing a show. This was at WBRC in Birmingham, where I worked for a while. Let's see, I don't know whether that one was there or not.
Now, you told me you did a live radio show with Hank Williams one time where you broadcasted and his band played.
Well, I had my Hester Battery Company finally got a spot. They were sponsoring a show at 6:30 in the morning on the radio station, and this was kind of like the Opry. It featured an Opry star, but they rotated taking the responsibility for it. And I had what's his name was the star on the show one time. I did not know him personally. The announcers didn't get to socialize necessarily with
Hank Williams.
Hank Williams.
Senior, not junior.
Yeah, senior. You didn't socialize with them particularly. They were the musicians, and we were the announcers over here.
Now this was done live at 6:30.
Oh, this was live. Yeah, this was live at 6:30 in the morning.
And you got Hank out of bed that early.
Well, somebody got him out of bed that early to get him up there. He had to get up there. But they were pretty good at meeting their obligations when shows were made and everything. WSM was a unique station in a lot of ways. They had a lot of jokers up there that loved to play pranks on one another, and they could become very elaborate. They had a show at noon every day, a radio show called Noontime Neighbors, and it always featured one of the country music groups, different ones at different days and everything. And one of the announcers was a young guy who was really enamored of being on 50,000 watts of radio power, covering the country. And he had a tendency to be a little bombastic when he got up to the microphone, and he thought he had to talk loud so it would go all the way out, to all of these 50,000 watts would be carried out. And it became something of a kind of an inside joke with the other people on the show. And so somebody came up with an idea to kind of cure him a little bit of that. And they took the microphone that he would use, and inside of it, they took all the insides of the microphone out, just left the case. And in that case, they put a little bitty speaker, and they ran a wire from that up into the control room, which was up above where the producers of the show and the engineers sat and watched, controlled everything that was going on. And so this day, when the guy walked up to say something, all of a sudden, he just got a couple of words out, and he heard this little bitty voice coming from somewhere saying, "Oh, back up, man, back up." He stopped, and then he kept his cool, the show must go on and everything. So he started again, and again this voice was saying, "You're spitting all over me, back up, calm down," And then they let him go on and make the next announcement. They didn't want to hold up the show for the radio audience. And the band played another number, and the announcer came up to make another announcement. And something else was another time. The voice came to him and everything. And finally, he happened to look up at the control room where the engineers and the producers were, and they were having hysterics. And he realized then what had happened, that they were pulling a joke on him, and he was mad. And he took off out of the studio, and they very quickly locked the door of the control room. He went up and beat on the door and called them a lot of unkind names and everything. But they would do that. They had on Sundays they had a musical show called Sunday Down South, and I cannot remember the man's name now, but everybody knew him. But he had this orchestra, big, good orchestra. They had a lot of musicians and everything around there, and they would come in and play for half an hour or something, and just play good music, dance music, popular music, and this sort of stuff. And so it was, and it had a good audience and everything. But they rigged it up one time, and they ran the clock. There was a big clock on the wall in the studio, so while you were performing and everything, you could keep an eye on the time so that you stayed within your time frame. And they ran that clock ahead when this guy was not the conductor was not watching, wouldn't see it and everything. And so then finally the time came to do the show according to that clock. It was way early. It was like a half an hour earlier than the show would really start. And so they announced the show, and he started into the opening number of the show when he was directing, and the musicians were stacked in layers, and one of the trombone players sat up on the back up to the upper level, and he had a mute in his trombone, and on purpose he dropped the mute, and it clattered down the steps going down to the front. And of course the conductor was upset, very upset, and to make it matters worse, the guy got up then and started going to get his mute back, and he kept knocking into things and knocking things down. And he ran into one of the other musicians on the way down and hit him on purpose, of course. And the other musician jumped up, and they started having a fight. And the poor conductor was just sat down in a chair and had his head in his hands. He was in complete shell shock and everything. So they finally stopped everything and told him, no, we were not on the air. We've still got time yet.
So that was a TV broadcast.
No, this was just a radio.
That was radio. Okay.
That was a radio broadcast. Oh.
Now you told me one time you were on the roof of the Murfreesboro courthouse.
Yeah, I had some really exciting remote opportunities and everything. When General Douglas MacArthur was brought back to the States, his wife was from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and so they planned a journey down. He flew into Nashville, I'm sure, and by limousine from there to Murfreesboro to her home and to her family and everything. And so WSM thought they really ought to cover this thing for the radio big time. May have hooked into NBC, which was their national outlet for the radio at any rate. And so they had all the announcers out at various points, and I had the choice spot of being on the roof of the courthouse in downtown Murfreesboro, because when they were going to come in and go around halfway around the courthouse and then out from the other way on the street. And of course I was supposed to describe what was going on as the car came around and the people were waving and all this sort of stuff, and which was a little difficult to do because there was in Columbia, Tennessee, there's a day each year called Mule Day.
Right.
And that's all it is. It's mules parading down the street. And the radio station always covered that. And whoever was the announcer that got selected, I mean, everybody tried to hide when they were deciding who was going to go down and be the announcer. Because as one guy so pithily put it, what can you say but said, here comes another mule. And when you said that, you covered the whole show. But I did, when the Arnold Engineering Development Center came to Tennessee.
Tullahoma.
Yeah, and Truman was president, and he came down for the big to-do to christen it, start it going and everything. And so WSM got the opportunity to cover that and to cover his speech, because he was going to make a speech. And so we all went down, and we had tables to sit at. And before the Truman came out, some of the Secret Service people came out and lectured us on what we could do and what we couldn't do. And one of the things we couldn't do was stand up. And they said, if you jump up, that may be the last jump you'll ever make. Because they were protecting the president, and they couldn't know if some guy jumped up in the middle of his speech whether he would whip out a gun and try to shoot the president. So it was a reasonable thing to do. But it kind of got us all sort of shaky, and we were real sure nobody even looked like they wanted to stand up while the president was out speaking and everything. But it was, at least I covered the president for whatever that was worth. You remember any other wild tales?
How about giving us a sample of announcing, say, like Cowboy Copus or Carl Smith, and give the Hester lingo and.
Oh, well, part of the problem is my voice is gone, Jimmy. But it would be something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, Hester Batteries. Hester, the battery that starts and goes, is glad to present now the star of our show. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Cowboy Copus." Something to that.
And the crowd roars.
And the crowd roars. In the Ryman Auditorium, and they would applaud like crazy for anybody down there.
Well, that's very interesting and fascinating. You told me this story several years ago, and I wanted to get it on videotape. And I didn't know you had this picture till tonight. That's there with the WSM microphone, and there's a lot of. There we go, WSM, and you were probably about 22, 23 years old.
Oh, let's see.
Not wanting you to give your age away. 24.
About 26.
26. And well, that's a lot of history. I know there's not too many people still around who worked with Hank Williams Sr. There's maybe little Jimmy Dickens or some of those guys.
Well, I did have the opportunity to be around some of them and everything during that time. But,
well, thank you for the time, and
my pleasure, Jimmy.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
And you don't mind me putting this up on Facebook, right?
No. Okay. If you're willing to, it's all right with me.
Okay, good deal.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Batson.
Why, sure.